Britain in the 1950s was a nation trying to believe in itself again. Factories roared back to life beneath gray skies. Families saved for years to afford their first motor car. Chrome gleamed beneath damp streetlights, and polished bonnets reflected a country desperate to leave wartime hardship behind. For many people, these cars represented freedom itself. A drive to the seaside, a proud arrival outside a suburban semi-detached house, a sense that better days had finally arrived. But behind the elegant styling and optimistic advertising, some British cars carried deeply embarrassing flaws. Engines failed without warning, gearboxes collapsed on family holidays, rust quietly consumed bodies that were barely a few winters old. And for thousands of ordinary owners, excitement slowly turned into frustration. These are 10 British cars from the 1950s that promised far more than they delivered, and some of them nearly destroyed the reputations of the companies that built them.
At number 10 was the handsome but deeply troublesome Hillman Minx. By the early 1950s, the Minx had become a familiar sight across Britain. Built by the Roots Group, it looked modern, respectable, and slightly American in its styling. Families admired its smooth curves and bright chrome grille. For many working households, it represented progress. Under the bonnet sat a modest 1.3-liter engine, producing just over 40 horsepower. It was never designed for excitement. Reliability was supposed to be its strength. Too often, it was not. Owners complained about weak electrical systems, overheating in summer traffic, and gearboxes that felt worn long before their time. Rainwater had an unpleasant habit of finding its way inside the cabin, leaving carpets damp through entire winters. For families heading to Blackpool or Brighton, breakdowns became painfully common memories. Children waited beside steaming engines, while fathers stood helplessly at the roadside. The promise of dependable family motoring quickly faded. But compared to what came next, the Minx almost seemed forgivable.
At number 9 was the ambitious Standard Vanguard. When it arrived after the war, the Vanguard looked radically different from the conservative British cars surrounding it. Influenced heavily by American styling, it carried wide bodywork, rounded lines, and a confident stance that suggested modern prosperity. Britain wanted optimism. The Vanguard tried to sell it. Its 2.1-liter engine sounded reassuring on paper, and buyers believed they were purchasing a car built for the future. Taxi drivers adopted them, families trusted them, businesses bought fleets. Then the problems began. The steering often felt vague and unsettling at higher speeds. Suspension components wore out rapidly on rough British roads, while poor build quality led to endless rattles and leaks. Some owners discovered rust appearing shockingly early around wheel arches and door sills. Mechanics stayed busy. Owners stayed disappointed. Long-distance journeys became exercises in anxiety rather than comfort. Drivers listened constantly for strange noises, wondering what might fail next. And the next car would test British patience even further.
At number 8 was the elegant but fragile Singer Gazelle. The Gazelle was marketed as refined motoring for aspiring middle-class Britain. Walnut dashboards, two-tone paintwork, and soft upholstery gave it an air of sophistication beyond its price. It looked expensive. That was part of the appeal. For young professionals and upwardly mobile families, the Gazelle felt like a small taste of luxury during a decade still recovering from rationing and austerity. Unfortunately, its engineering rarely matched its appearance. The 1.5-liter engine struggled with reliability issues, particularly concerning overheating and oil leaks. Owners also faced persistent electrical gremlins that could leave headlights flickering or ignition systems failing without warning. And then there was the rust. British winters destroyed many Gazelles with alarming speed. Salted roads quietly ate through body panels, while owners watched their proud new purchase deteriorate year after year. The dream of elegance became painfully expensive to maintain. Yet one car managed to embarrass its owners in far more public ways. At number 7 sat the infamous Austin A90 Atlantic. Few British cars of the era aimed higher than the Atlantic. Austin hoped to challenge American convertibles with sweeping bodywork, white wall tires, and dramatic chrome styling. It looked bold, glamorous, and confident, at least in photographs. Powered by a 2.6-liter four-cylinder engine, the Atlantic was supposed to bring British style to the world market, especially America. Instead, it became a commercial humiliation. The car was heavy, underpowered, and thirsty. Drivers expected effortless cruising, but discovered sluggish acceleration and awkward handling. Reliability issues only deepened the disappointment, with overheating and gearbox troubles becoming frequent complaints. Worse still, British buyers found the styling slightly ridiculous. It appeared too flashy for post-war Britain, where modesty still shaped public taste. Many owners felt embarrassed rather than admired. Some cars fail quietly. The Atlantic failed very publicly. But beneath Britain's growing motor industry, another disaster was already taking shape.
At number 6 was the oddly ambitious Wolseley 444. Wolseley carried a reputation for dignity and refinement. Their illuminated grille badge and polished interiors appealed strongly to conservative middle-class buyers who valued respectability above all else. The 444 appeared perfect for that audience. Compact yet elegant, it featured leather seating, polished wood trim, and a 1.3-liter engine designed for calm, comfortable motoring. Doctors bought them. Small business owners admired them. Retired couples trusted them. But many owners quickly discovered that refinement could not hide weak engineering. Performance felt painfully slow, even by 1950 standards. Engines struggled on hills, while reliability problems emerged around the cooling system and clutch components. The suspension also suffered badly on uneven roads, creating constant repair costs. Owners who stretched their finances to buy one often felt trapped afterward. The car looked respectable parked outside the house. It just struggled to survive the journey there. And what came next would become one of Britain's most frustrating motoring experiences. At number 5 was the notoriously temperamental MG Magnette ZA. The Magnette was beautiful. Long, flowing lines, a proud grille, and sporting character gave it genuine charm. Enthusiasts loved the idea of combining MG performance with practical family motoring. And initially, the dream worked. The 1.5-liter B-Series engine delivered lively handling and respectable performance for the period. Drivers felt sophisticated behind the wheel. It was the kind of car that made ordinary journeys feel slightly special. Until it broke down. Electrical faults became infamous among owners. Carburetor troubles caused rough running and unreliable starting, particularly during cold British mornings. Oil leaks stained driveways across suburban Britain. And repairs were rarely cheap. Families who purchased the Magnette for dependable everyday use often discovered it demanded the temperament of a sports car owner instead. Patience became part of ownership. But patience would be tested even more severely by the next car on this list. At number 4 was the deeply flawed Morris Isis. The Isis arrived with enormous expectations. Morris wanted a larger, more prestigious saloon capable of competing with higher-end rivals while still appealing to ordinary professional families. On paper, it seemed ideal. A 2.6-liter six-cylinder engine promised smoothness and quiet cruising. Spacious seating and conservative styling made it appear dependable and mature. The reality proved far less reassuring. The heavy engine created poor weight distribution, damaging handling and making steering feel cumbersome. Fuel consumption shocked many owners already struggling with rising living costs, while mechanical reliability remained inconsistent. Then came the suspension issues. Owners reported alarming instability on uneven roads, particularly during wet weather. Long-distance journeys became tiring rather than relaxing. The Isis was supposed to represent success. Instead, it often became an expensive burden.
and the next vehicle would push British engineering embarrassment even further. At number 3 was the short-lived Jensen 541. Now, this was a different kind of disappointment. The Jensen 541 was fast, luxurious, and undeniably beautiful. Its fiberglass body looked futuristic beside the steel-bodied saloons crowding British roads. Wealthy buyers admired its exclusivity and impressive top speed, approaching 120 miles per hour. It should have been a triumph. Instead, reliability problems haunted the car almost immediately. Complex electrical systems failed regularly. Build quality varied dramatically between examples, and replacement parts became difficult to source even during the car's own production years. Owners expected refined grand touring. Too often, they received endless mechanical headaches. For wealthy professionals hoping to impress clients or neighbors, breakdowns became deeply embarrassing experiences. A glamorous British GT sitting stranded at the roadside destroyed the illusion instantly. And somehow, Britain still had 2 even worse disasters to come.
At number 2 was the catastrophically unreliable Rover P4. Today, the Rover P4 is remembered fondly by many enthusiasts, but early examples caused genuine frustration during the 1950s. Rover built the car as a symbol of quiet British prestige. Politicians, executives, and senior professionals admired its dignified styling and refined interior. The Cyclops grille of early models gave it a unique identity unlike anything else on British roads. But sophistication came at a cost. Complicated engineering introduced endless opportunities for failure. Gear selection issues, overheating, and troublesome braking systems plagued some early owners. Repairs could be painfully expensive, especially for buyers who had stretched their savings to achieve middle-class respectability. For many families, owning a Rover meant social pride mixed with financial anxiety. Every unusual sound felt expensive. Every long journey carried uncertainty.
Yet, even the troubled Rover avoided the humiliation suffered by the car at number 1 because no British car of the 1950s better captured the gap between promise and disappointment than the Austin Princess. The Princess was meant to represent the finest traditions of British motoring elegance: large, graceful, prestigious. With limousine-like styling, rich wood interiors, and vast leather seats, it projected wealth and authority. Seeing one glide through rainy London streets felt deeply impressive during the austerity years of post-war Britain. People dreamed of owning one. Some sacrificed enormously to make it happen. And then, ownership began. The enormous car suffered from dreadful reliability problems. Its heavy construction strained mechanical components constantly. Engines overheated, electrical systems failed unpredictably, fuel consumption became ruinous for ordinary owners. But perhaps worst of all was the maintenance. Repair bills mounted relentlessly. Mechanics struggled with the car's complexity, while rust quietly spread beneath its elegant exterior. Some owners watched their expensive luxury car deteriorate faster than cheaper family saloons parked beside it. The humiliation cut deeply, because the Princess was never just transport. It was aspiration itself, and when it failed, it felt personal.
By the end of the 1950s, Britain's motor industry still carried enormous pride and remarkable talent. These cars were built during a nation's attempt to rebuild itself after devastation and sacrifice. They reflected hope as much as engineering, sometimes perhaps too much hope. Behind every unreliable gearbox or steaming radiator was a family trying to build a better life. A father proudly polishing chrome on a Sunday morning. A couple driving toward the seaside, believing the future had finally arrived. That is why these cars still matter. Not because they were perfect, but because they reveal something deeply human about post-war Britain itself. Ambitious, resilient, elegant, and occasionally flawed in ways impossible to ignore. And perhaps that is what makes these forgotten machines so fascinating
all these years later. If one of these cars brought back memories for you, or perhaps for someone in your family, share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoy these journeys through Britain's motoring past, consider subscribing for more forgotten stories from the roads, factories, and dreams of another era. Because the next chapter of British motoring history hides even stranger tales than these.